Oh, so it looks like we're in. Welcome to the Todoist office hours. I'm Neil. I work in product marketing here at Doist. And today we're covering a topic that I'm sure many of you know about, or if you haven't, it's been around: GTD, getting things done. It's what, when we were building up the workflows and software for Todoist, we always looked to GTD. It's one of the first places where people talked about the ideas of getting tasks out of your head and into a list to free up that mental space. And to walk us through this today, we have Christina Armstrong, who is a productivity coach, and she focuses on knowledge workers. And one thing she mentioned was that she takes people from overwhelmed to overjoyed. I really loved you wrote that, Christina. And I'll let you introduce yourself and take it away from here. We will have questions at the end. Please add your questions to the comments, and we will cover them right at the end. And yeah, take it away, Christina.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. And hello, everyone, for joining us. My name is Christina Armstrong. I am a personal productivity coach, and that's something that is one of many hats that I wear. I also work full-time in higher education, so my first full-time job is in higher education. I mostly work with knowledge workers like myself, particularly with a focus on higher education, and that's because there's always changing priorities and there's a lot to do, and not always a lot of resources to do it. And so very quickly, you kind of have to sink or swim, so to speak, unfortunately. And so from my experience in higher education and working with other knowledge workers, I understand how easy it can be to become overwhelmed by the number of emails that you have and phone calls and various projects that you're working on, and how do you keep everything straight, particularly when you realize, I feel like everyone has this moment where what they did in college or grad school or high school, it works for a little bit in your first full-time job, and then at some point it breaks, and then you're like, holy crap, what do I do? So that sense of overwhelm. And I love working with people to kind of pull out and maximize the skills and strengths that they already have to allow them to move into more peaceful, calm productivity. For me, the GTD system really helped with that. And so sometimes I help people implement GTD. Sometimes it's just email management. Just kind of depends on what folks are looking for. So delighted to be here and hopefully answer any questions that you all have and showcase a little bit about how I'm implementing GTD in Todoist.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I know that feeling when we first get into the work world. You're kind of juggling with whatever you have, whether it's pencil, you have a notepad right beside your desk and you're scribbling it down. Then eventually you try Google Tasks or whatever. And you got to get to a place where you have a system that works with the way that you work. And it's different for everybody. And that's why productivity is so interesting. You kind of Frankenstein together a system at the end of the day. And GTD was one of those first ones that came out and really hit people with the importance of this and the power of it. And as I mentioned, the idea of freeing your mind, like you can live better through this work was so strong. So I'm really excited to hear you share your insights, having taught so many people and also working in a situation, like education, where there's obviously a ton to keep track of.
Yes, and contrary to popular belief, I don't have summers off, so I'm working. It never fails in someone in my family. Oh, it's summers. You're on vacation, right? No,
Yeah.
not a vacation. Still, I work 12 months a year, fortunately. So, but yeah. So I don't know if you want me to show things or how you want me to start showing things.
Well, we can start with, if you have a presentation, we can go that way, or you can just start talking, explaining, what you think is the perfect workflow to introduce with.
Okay, so I think for me, with Todoist, I can't even recall how I landed on it, but going back to something that you just said, you're absolutely right. We have these, for me, it was pen and paper. So a to-do list. I was like, okay, I have a to-do list. I am solid. Like, that's all I need. I write down my tasks. Great. But I would, after a while, you realize you've got like 14 to-do lists and you can only find like 10 of them. And so I would rewrite to-do lists every single day. The to-do list was maybe like the size of a sheet of paper, because anything more than that was just too much to look at. To see a laundry list of like 50 things that I was doing was just too much. So I came across GTD, the book. I don't even remember how. And I picked it up, read probably like the first chapter or two. I was like, this is boring, and I put it down. I didn't know. I didn't understand what I was doing. I was young and naive.
I think a lot of people have that reaction to start with. It's very dense.
Yeah.
You know, it's very like methodical and almost engineering style textbook in some ways.
Yes. And it's so much, it's almost like when you read a book and they start out with like, you know, in this research study, we had 47 participants and the, you know, N equals 47, the t-tests were like, I don't need to know the standard deviation. Like, can we just get to the, but, you know, once you're able to get past kind of the introductory information and you get into the workflow and you start to really like connect some of the dots of things and see how the 5 parts of the workflow come together, it just really clicked for me. I remember one of the first tools that I used for implementing GTD was called GQs. I don't even know if it still exists. Maybe it does. And it was just a very basic like checklist. Like you had your checklist, you had some projects associated with it. I don't even remember if you could add metadata. But after a while, that stopped working for me because it was still just a list of things to do. And then I stumbled upon Todoist. And I've been using it since about 2015, 2016, and it works so well for me. I think the thing that works the best is it's incredibly simple, and for me, it's very intuitive. I'll show my setup now, just so folks are able to see it. But the setup that I have now is not the setup that I had, you know, when I first started. This little speaker thing won't go away. I don't know why, but that's just gonna live there. Like it will not disappear if I click on it. But the way that I have it set up now has just really evolved a lot. So you know, just to quickly walk through what my setup is, of course, you know, projects are kind of my guiding light, so to speak, for how I manage all of my tasks. I also love that I'm able to see, you know, all of my projects. I just keep them in alphabetical order because that's just a way to keep myself organized. And then I also am able to color code, which I've kind of thought about not doing anymore, but, you know, color code, like personal stuff from work stuff versus my coaching clients. Got like that single actions project for those things that aren't necessarily a project according to GTD. Nice. But having this list does a couple of things for me, especially with the GTD process. You know, part of the workflow is that review process. And in that review process, in Todoist, it's really easy to look and review my list, my projects list. That's it. It's literally right there. I'm able to look at every single project and just quickly glance and say, you know, okay, where am I at with this thing? Where am I at with this thing? Why is this blank? Do I need a next action? Do I need to add on this? So it really helps to trigger very quickly what's the next thing that I need to do. And then I also am able to literally see a manifestation of my capacity, right? So sometimes people will look at this project list and they're like, holy crap, that's a lot. Like, yeah, kind of is. And it feels like it, but I'm not out of control. And that's always my measure for myself. Because some of these projects, even though it looks like a ton of projects, you know, some of this shopping list, like that's not stressful for me, right? And then some of these things are on hold as well. So I'm not necessarily doing anything. I'm waiting for someone else. But, and what's most helpful for me with Todoist and GTD together is I don't forget about a project, even if it's on hold. So that's been really great. And then the other thing that I do that I'm able to use in my workflow is the labels and filters, of course. So all of my tasks, I put labels on. I add that waiting for tag if I'm waiting for things, time, the context. I'm very big on context, energy levels. I've stopped using medium energy just because I realize that's not helpful. I'm either like gung-ho a 10 and I want to do anything, or I want to lay on the couch and not do anything. There's really aren't a lot that are in between.
That's interesting that you use energy. That's one of the different like kind of ways that people measure a task. You can do time, you can do energy. I've also found energy to be quite interesting, especially in these times we're just coming out of. It's like 99% low energy tasks because it's been so tough to regain your energy. And it's really hard to attack, let's say, writing the first draft of something at the end of the day. And so when you're labeling by energy, I find you can more easily do what's appropriate to where you're at.
Right, absolutely. And being thoughtful as well about tasks too, and being honest. I find that if there are tasks that I, have in Todoist and it's been there for like 3 or 4 weeks or 5 or 6 weeks, and I see that it's a high energy task, for me, that's my sign that the task is too big. Even if I feel like I've made it really small, I have not made it small enough that I haven't done it. Because even if something's high energy, I should, if I sprint for 15 minutes, I should be okay. Or sprint for 30 minutes, I should be okay. So sometimes I just have to make things a little bit smaller. So those are the labels that I have. The filters are my absolute favorite part. I feel like this is the secret weapon that ties everything together with GTD, because this is how I create my next actions lists. So I tag things based on context, and these are the contexts that I have set up right now, although I've changed them, of course, as my workflow changes. But like my email next actions lists, with email, it's really important to, for me with email, it's really important that I get my emails like out and, get them done pretty much by the end of every single day. With my internet lists, I try to get those done as well. With that time marker is really helpful too, because sometimes I'll see this huge list of things and I will, it's like, oh my gosh, I have, 10 things to do. That's super stressful. But then I see like, okay, that's 5 minutes, that's 5 minutes, that's 5 minutes. This is like 30 minutes worth of work. So looks overwhelming, but it's actually not necessarily overwhelming. So I really like having that chance to like remind myself of like what my brain sees as like a threat is not like you're okay. It's not actually a threat. And then the ones that I use super often, I just have up here in my favorites window. So my shopping list, I go shopping once a week. So I always put that at the top because I want to be able to quickly see what I need to buy. And then all of my next actions lists that I use regularly are also up here as well. So pretty much on a day-to-day basis, I would come in, it always lands on, let me see. Make sure I zoom in a bit. Hopefully that's helpful. So on the
that looks good.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks for that information. So on the next actions lists, so in every day I'll come in and it lands on today automatically, so that way I know what I'm doing today. Holding GTD office hours, check. That one's pretty much done. Then I would move on to my next actions lists pretty much after that. I very rarely put dates on things in Todoist. Most of my things that are due on a particular day, I put in on my calendar. So if something is due on a particular day, I put it on my calendar. If I like really, really want to make sure I don't forget something, I will put it in Todoist as well with a date, but usually my calendar is enough. And then I just go to my next actions lists. So what do I, how's my energy level? What do I feel like doing? Am I going to send out a couple of emails? Do I need to do some stuff in Obsidian? Now that I'm no longer working remote, I'm back in the office, I'm probably going to add an office next actions list here. But that's pretty much it as I roll through my day. Sometimes I'll check this waiting for tag just to see if there are things I need to follow up on. But that's pretty much it. So it helps me to move through my day and not have to, stress about projects and, oh my gosh, what's coming up today, paired with my weekly review. I've already done that review process. So I've already kind of planned what my priorities are for the week. And I just focus on executing this way.
Cool. All right. So a few questions to start with. So do you add tasks? You're adding tasks throughout the week whenever they come up and you'll just kind of throw them in?
Absolutely. So, if I have anything that comes up, one of two things will happen. If I happen to have my computer up and I'm active and I'm in Todoist, then I'll just add it, hit Q and then add it in as a quick task really quickly. Or if I'm not, let's say I'm on a phone call or something like that, or I'm away from my desk, I have my paper inbox at my desk as well. So sometimes I'll just pull out a piece of paper, I'll write down what the task is, and I put it in my in tray. I usually do this more so if I'm like really in flow on something. I try not to navigate to another tab because that distracts me. It takes my attention away from what I was working on, because then I'll be like, oh, Gmail, or oh, YNAB, or Amazon or whatever. So just keeping it on paper, analog, is not going to be a distraction. I get that thought out of my head right away. Put it in my in tray so I feel like I can let go of that psychologically, and then I move back to whatever the task is that I was working on. But yeah, pretty much throughout the day, if I'm out and about, I use I have an Android phone, and there's a widget where you can add a task really quickly. So I'll do that. So that's pretty much my capturing all the time. I have long given up this idea that I can remember things. I'm just not. If I do remember it, awesome. That's just a bonus. But 8 times out of 10, I don't, and I'm glad that I wrote it down.
Yeah, we all work in so many modalities now. So the idea of remembering 6 different tracks of to-dos in your head seems really tough, because we're all quite productive. So my next question is, I want to ask a little bit about your next actions filters. So those are those, like, let's say like your next actions email, that's going to capture every task that has the email label. What else is in that filter? Like what is it looking for?
Right now, it's just email.
It's just email.
It's just email. And I used to, sorry to cut you off. I used to I used to have a next actions label. So I would have next actions and email, but I got rid of the next actions label, because what I've decided to do is, unless something is a next action, it's not a task in Todoist. So that's either...
That's what I was going to ask about, is how do you manage that, and how do you manage the long-term tasks? How exactly does that work?
Yeah, so that removing the next actions label has been a newer shift. I think I did that probably like maybe 2 months ago, and I'm slowly transitioning. I started working with Obsidian as my project support, and so what I'll do is I'll have essentially, for some tasks, I don't need a list to remind me what the next action is. I just know. But for other projects, rather, if there's something that's like a checklist, that checklist will generally live in Obsidian. In some instances, I might put it in like the comments section. If it's going to be a pretty short project, there's maybe like 2 more next actions, then I won't bother putting it in Obsidian. It's not worth the lift there. But if it's a major project, it's going to be over the course of several months. It's going to have lots of reference material. Then I'll put all of that stuff in Obsidian. That way I can access that kind of wherever I need to, and locally, and particularly with where I work, there's some things that I, for security purposes, I just keep locally on my computer.
That's interesting. So do you find that there's an overlap? So this is kind of like your personal productivity dashboard then?
Absolutely.
For tasks that are coming up right away. But you're saying that there is a bit of a, like if you needed to know everything you had to do in a day, you would have 2 systems to check? I'm just kind of... No.
So if there are things that I need to do in any given day, through my weekly review process, I will essentially know that. So if, let's say that there's a project that is, it needs to be completed by the end of the week, so I really need to push that forward, then I'm going to be aware of that in my weekly review, and that's basically going to be a priority project. So I might, every single day, I might say, to move that project along, this task needs to be done on this particular day, and that's when that today view can be helpful, because as soon as I finish that task, then I'm thinking to myself, okay, now what's the next action for that project? It doesn't come up for me too often where I have multiple projects that are all due within like a week. I'm usually able to kind of budget out my own time. So if I'm asked to do a project, I'll basically propose a timeline, and then it's up to me to keep myself on progress towards that timeline. And then sometimes I will, I'll get other projects that are like, this just came in, it's super important, and we need to get to it right away. Okay, cool. Then other things will need to be paused, and I'll just kind of prioritize that project for that week. For the most part, I work in these next actions lists, but there are some instances where I will work in projects if they're like super like that's my focus for that week, then pretty much nothing else matters. Like I've been told that this is the priority project, and so instead of working in these next action filters, I'll literally just look at the project and be like, okay, what are the things that I need to do for this project, and then I'll just bang those things out. Sometimes, but it just kind of depends on the project, and I'll know that for myself what that urgency looks like.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole other aspect you're introducing here of, you said something amazing, which is I budget my time well. Something amazing we can all learn at work is how many projects we can actually take on and how we can manage it so that we're not in a constantly rushed phase. And we can do the deep work is another theme you brought up and get into that state of flow. Those are so important for being super productive, because then you're doing your best work over the course of 3 hours rather than kind of doing it scattered over the course of a few days. And that's not as rewarding. And, your output might not be as good. So it's amazing to see those things threaded together in your system.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also helps me, I think, in between tasks. We have this moment where we've finished one task and the next question is always, what should I work on now? And for some people, okay, well, what's the email that just landed in my inbox, or what's the thing that's most stressful for me? But with my next actions list, it's literally what's the next thing on the list. That's the next thing that I'm going to be working on. So if I'm in my internet next actions list, in most instances, the next thing is whatever is right beneath the first thing that I was just working on. Assuming I still feel like, engaging with those behaviors and such. Sometimes I'll, no, my energy level's fried. I don't feel like working on any more, internet high energy things. There's no low energy things in the internet context. So I'm just going to leave this context for the day.
Well, that's amazing. What you're kind of like showing, and especially as we talk to people as research for Todoist and understand about people's productivity, is you're showing how you have 5 hours and you've got a lot of freedom if you set your system right. You can finish a task and then say, where am I at? What do I want to do? Email right now? Do I want to go for a walk for 5 minutes to come back? Versus the very reactive system of like, I just finished something. What's the next fire I got to put out? And that's really hard on the system, and it really can pull us down. And it's not always easy to see that that's because of the system of task management that we are using, or lack of that system.
Yeah, and a lot of that too, I read the book Willpower not that long ago, and it talks about how, when we're constantly making these decisions, we're depleting a little bit of willpower every single time. And so as much as possible, if you don't have to make decisions about small things like what should I work on next, if you can make those decisions up front as much as possible, knowing that fires kind of pop up, then that allows you throughout the day to really, save up your willpower for when you need it, especially towards the end of the day. So I definitely find it helps me.
Yeah, and go right into your life. Like, what's for dinner? Like salad or pizza? I'll just take the pizza. Like, I don't have the willpower to choose the salad right now. That it really does happen like that.
Yes, absolutely. Like, oh, I've been making decisions all day about what to do at work. I don't want to decide what's for dinner.
Yes, exactly. Well, we have some questions, so let's get and start with that. Alistair asked, for each project, I set a purpose. Why is this project worth doing? And a vision. What does good look like? I'd love a way to show this on screen, but not as tasks. Any tips?
Show this on screen, but not as tasks. I wonder if this is just me spitballing. So if our purpose, our general, I'm thinking like life purpose, right? That's generally not going to shift a ton from project to project. Now, I might say, what's the purpose of me doing this project? It's my job. Like, that might be my purpose, but probably not, right? Like working in higher education, access to higher education is very important to me. So every single project that I've got might just fall under that larger umbrella. So in GTD, they talk about the horizons of focus or the 6 levels of work. And so that purpose is not per project, it's really per person. So it's your purpose as an individual. And same thing with vision. And so one way that you might do this is to have a project maybe that's called purpose, that's called vision, and maybe you as part of your weekly review, you would look at purpose and you would have your list of projects that are under that purpose area, and maybe they're incompletable tasks. So you put the little asterisk in front of it, so that way it doesn't show up as a task with a check mark next to it. So that's one way that you could possibly do it. You could also have it just be, in every single project, you have either using the task descriptions or using the comments, you would put, purpose, you would put vision, and that could be a way to look at it as well. So a couple of different ways that I think that you could manage that if that's something that's super, super important to you. It's also, I don't think everything needs to live in Todoist. I'm also not, I'm tool agnostic. I think whatever tool works best, if that's pen and paper, if that's a huge poster that you have up on your wall, or a dry erase board or a whiteboard, and every project you put, your why and your vision, and that's all that you look at every single day as you're working on something, I think that could be really helpful as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. Also, you shout out task descriptions, which is a beta feature, which everyone may not know. And that's proof that Christina knows what she's talking about. But that's amazing. I personally have a project, which is like my work overview, and it has all of my projects. And so like Christina was saying, that's a place where I can kind of look at the big picture using either comments or task descriptions. And yeah, being tool agnostic, you can link to documents. It's very easy to link to other documents just using Markdown. So you can have, let's say you have a spec for each of your projects, which is an interesting thing to do. Have a page where you write out what you're doing and what good looks like in Google Docs, and then you link and click to it. When we do marketing campaigns here, we link to our specs quite often right from Todoist. So you just kind of click over and you get the big layout, but the task is still small and easy to manage. So that was great. Thank you, Alistair. Next question is from Dennis. So why do you not nest projects? For example, coaching Ashley. This is from Ashley.
Yeah, speed.
Yeah,
so I want to be able to very quickly glance without having to touch the mouse and see everything that I've got going on. So if I nest something, I don't see it and I forget about it. Sometimes that's good. So my someday maybe list, for example, is nested because there are some someday maybe projects that if I don't see these, like, it's fine. They're not active projects. Nothing's on fire. I'll be fine. So I'll just have to actively go in and unnest this. So for me, it's a level of friction to have those projects nested. It's the same reason why I don't nest. Some folks will have a personal project and they nest all of their personal tasks under there, and then they'll have a work one and nest them under there. I don't do that, and that's also because out of fluidity, I'm just kind of working on whatever. If the email that I'm sending is for personal stuff, I send it. If it's for work stuff, I send it. I don't stop and think, okay, is this a personal email or is this a work email? It's on my email list, so I'm just going to send the email.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. For the record, do nest projects, and now I might switch.
No,
it's really fast. That is really fast. I love it. Yeah, and then so like a random tip: if you hit the /, you go to search in Todoist on the web, and then you can quickly just type in where you want to go. So it's really about being flexible, figuring out what way works for you. So thank you, Dennis, for the question. The next one is from Daniel. So can you please talk about your obsidian filter? Is that building a second brain kind of thing? And that is from Daniel.
I wish it were that exciting. No. So I essentially use Obsidian for my project support material. So I have used OneNote for years, love it, amazing tool, but it's starting to become a bit of a bottomless pit for me. Particularly with Obsidian, I appreciate the backlinking and the wikis and all that stuff because it helps me to at the least recognize how something that's been in there for 3 years, in my system, could potentially be something that I could pull forward. In OneNote, I wouldn't necessarily ever find it unless I went out and looked for it. But in Obsidian, with the links, you're able to just, every time you're adding something, you can link it to something else. And that's super helpful for me. So, unfortunately, the Obsidian, it's not, I have no aspirations to build a second brain. I think that's awesome for some people. It's for me, it's just for project support right now, and a way to manage kind of larger scale things. So if something's in Obsidian, it's usually something like a mind map, or if I've got tons of project support material, files and things like that. Again, I would keep the stuff in Todoist, right? But there's certain things that for security purposes, I have to keep locally on my computer. So I keep that stuff on my computer instead of in cloud-based areas, and I don't keep it on my like a general file. And Markdown's easy and simple and stuff like that. So, but I only just started using Obsidian a couple of months ago, and it's fun. I like it.
Yeah, like Rome is also doing interesting things with backlinks, and the second brain idea is really interesting. For those of you who don't know as much about it, I would look into it and Google it. Like, there's definite ways to like connect your thoughts together and connect your notes in ways that weren't easily possible before. I am still using Evernote, and I'll say mixed feelings with where it is and where it's been, but it's not easy to link. You do end up searching forever for an old note, as you said. So thank you very much, Daniel, for the question. The next one is Evrim, and his question is very specific there. How are you using the waiting for label?
The waiting for label is essentially anything that it's an active project and the ball is not in my court, essentially, but I don't want to kind of forget where I am. So in certain instances, if that's, sending someone a meeting link, or, waiting for a particular date to come closer before that particular action can happen. I applied for a business license the other day. I am waiting for them to approve it. It takes 45 days, but I don't want to forget that I'm waiting on that business license. So I'm able to go in and double check what that looks like. So I use this list to basically keep track of where I am with certain projects. So in conjunction with this projects list, every single day when I'm doing, every single week when I'm doing my weekly review, if I do see, a task in a particular project, but it's not, a next action that I'm able to do, it helps me to see, okay, I'm waiting on this. Is this something, do I need to send a follow-up email to someone on this? Do I need to clarify something, or whatever it happens to be? So that way I'm not getting behind on something. Sometimes with certain projects, people's reminder that they're waiting for something is when that thing is due, right? Like, oh, I asked Neil to send me XYZ, and Neil forgot about it, but I also didn't follow up with Neil, and it falls on me, not on Neil. So I need to make sure that I'm capturing that I asked Neil to do something, so that way if things happen, because we're humans and not robots, that I can shoulder tap Neil, hey, just FYI, do you think you'll still be able to get that to me on Friday, or whatever it happens to be? So I'll look at that waiting for list to just remind me of what those things are.
I'm sorry, I forgot about that.
No, it's okay. We're human beings. We're human beings.
I appreciate that, the human in productivity, because these are like systems we use to try to do that. I have a question that comes up from this about the way you use calendar and Todoist together. So I'm curious, like for me, it's important. I use the Today View a lot to see at a glance everything that's kind of in my day. And I'm curious, do you have an overview look, or how do you kind of like think about your day in the morning when you think about everything I'm going to do today? Do you not know what's coming next? Is that part of it, or So generally, I take the data from my calendar, so all of my appointments that are there, and the data from that Today View, and that tells me what kind of day I'm going to have. So I'll have some days where I look at my calendar, and from 9 to 5, I'm in an all-day retreat. But I look at Todoist, and I've got 17 tasks to do. That's going to be a challenging day, because I'm going to have trouble at getting those things in. And so that might mean that if I can, I might renegotiate some deadlines on certain things. I am
a big fan of only keeping it real due dates in Todoist. So if something is due, like, I'm not going to be like, well, I would like to get it done on Friday, but it's not due till Wednesday. Like, no, I'm going to put that it's due, that Wednesday or whatnot. But then if it's due, that allows me the chance to see, hey, I'm going to have, to ask someone if I can get extra time. But I also generally do that during my weekly review. So I'll already know about those particular days at least a couple of days ahead, unless something got added to my calendar last minute, which an all day last minute, like, that's just frustrating. Like, we're gonna surprise, we're gonna take your whole day. Sorry, I didn't give you more than 48 hours notice. That's not a thing that doesn't happen.
No to-do list can save you from that.
Exactly.
When that happens, it's just game over.
But I'm also, I'm salary. So if that means that I have to get things done, then I also know I might be working 10 hours today because I have this, 8-hour retreat, and then after dinner and such with my daughter, I'm going to go back to work because I have to get things done. So it's helpful to know that kind of stuff in advance, though. But if I, let's say on the other end of the spectrum, I come in, I see my calendar is, I've got 2 meetings today. They're relatively short, and I've got, basically the rest of the day to have that freedom and flexibility. Then I'm able to be really thoughtful about taking my chronotype into consideration. I generally get things done best in the morning. So my high energy things I'm going to do between like maybe 10 and noon. And then the rest of the afternoon, I try to be really thoughtful and make like phone calls in the afternoon. And sometimes I'll send emails in the afternoon if I don't, the stuff that really doesn't take a ton of brain energy. So that's how I manage my calendar in that today view.
That's great. Chronotype. That sounds so cool. Like, I've never really kind of used the term or heard it said out loud, but I'm also a morning chronotype. And I'm going to be saying that to lots of people. And they're going to say, what's that?
There's like 4 different, there's lion, bear, dolphin, and shark, tiger. I don't know. Or there's some other animal, but yeah, it's not just like, oh, you're morning or evening. Like, there's certain, yeah, there's a test that you can take. I'm sure if you Google it, like, what's my chronotype, you can see what that is. But and of course, like any assessment, right? It's very it's what is your chronotype as of today, as of the day that you're answering the questions, not like for the rest of your life per se. But it can be helpful to validate, oh, this is why it's really hard for me to wake up at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning and get things done. Like, great, don't wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and get things done. Like I woke up at 5 o'clock this morning. Actually woke up at like 4:45 before my alarm clock. Like, I am a morning person. I don't need an alarm clock to make me a morning person. But please don't ask me to stay up until 10 because I will be miserable, right? Like, for some people, and it's just knowing that about yourself.
Yeah. So we won't schedule the next office hours at 10 p.m. then.
I will not show up. Thank you.
Yeah, just me solo. So I had one more question. There was, just for an example task. And let's say we were writing a report and you had 3 drafts. You do 3 drafts before you finish the report. So I'm curious, do you have that task scheduled in Todoist, or is that just going to be on your next items list because you need to kind of get that going? Let's say if it's a week out. So how do you make sure you don't forget it?
Yeah, that kind of depends. So, if I'm going to write a first draft and my first draft is going to get us 80% there, that's going to be very different than if my first draft is going to get us 50% there. So it really depends on the scope of the project. As much as possible, my drafts, like writing, is the last thing that I do. So it usually ends up being like, first I'm going to do a mind map, or first I'm going to do a brainstorm, or first I'm going to do research. So I really have to think about, okay, if I have this, writing a report, like, do I need to look up stuff? Does that rely on other people to get that data? Like, writing is the last thing that I'm going to do. So what do I need to do, in front of all of that? Because I find that when I'm report writing, that's always the thing that stops me. It's like, I get to a point where I'm like, oh crap, I can't finish this because I need to figure out the answer to this question. Like, dang it, I should have asked for this beforehand. And then you're like super stressed because that person, of course, is out on vacation for that week or something. Like, it ends up being that way. But so I'll usually give myself some semblance of, what I anticipate the project, like how long I anticipate it will take me. And then, I'll kind of gauge it from there. So I think it'll take me, a week to write the first draft. So let me give myself a little bit of time to do the research, et cetera, et cetera. I'm, as I talked about before, I'm not big on sprinting. So it's very difficult for me to work on a project for like 3 hours straight. It's just not a thing I can do. So I'm more likely to work on, I'm going to do, if I do like a Pomodoro, my Pomodoro is actually, it's not 25/5. My Pomodoro is 52/17, which
Me
sounds
too.
like, nice.
Yeah. I read about that.
Specific. Yes, 52/17. 25 is not long enough. I'm still in the flow.
Yes.
So, but I can usually only do 1, maybe 2 Pomodoros like that. And then I'm pretty much done for the day. So I don't try to push it, particularly if I want to get quality work, unless I like absolutely have to, then I will, but I really try not to.
So that makes perfect sense. And so the last question I wanted to follow up there is are those Todoist tasks? So let's say you have this report and you've got research phase, mind map stage. Those are Todoist tasks that you review in your weekly review, I guess, and then you're going to follow up when you can in the week.
Yes, absolutely. So it's also recognizing some of those tasks are going to be parallel tasks. So meaning that I could also, I could research something while I am emailing someone, something separately, or maybe it's about the same situation. So they're both next actions, basically, right? One of them is going to be on my internet list though, and one of them is going to be on my email list, but they're both for that same project to move that project forward. Those would absolutely be tasks that I would put into Todoist.
That's great. Yeah, using that is very powerful. All right, we have another question here from Tyler. Do you have any morning, evening health habit stuff? And do you manage this in Todoist or a separate app? That's a great question.
I have morning and evening stuff. I actually just did a video last week on my YouTube channel about my starting my workday and ending my workday routine. That usually lives in Todoist, but because I've been working from home the past 14 months or so, I took it out of Todoist. Now I got to add it back in because it's already throwing me off. I can tell that I don't have that. But that's generally the most that I do. It's not helpful for me to see tasks that I don't need to be reminded of in Todoist. So for example, in the morning when I wake up, if I wake up at 5, don't get me wrong, I don't always wake up at 5. But if I do, I like to get in some type of workout. I don't need Todoist to remind me to get in a workout. The habit tracking for me is also not particularly motivating because I already have that intrinsic motivation. It's something I just naturally do. It's just more about time. I think if I wanted to take on a new habit or build a new habit, I would absolutely put that into Todoist. If I wanted to, every time I come into work, actually, perfect example. So when I come back onto campus, we have to do a health screening, basically saying like, hey, do you have symptoms? We have to do this every single day that we come into work. Some days I remember to do it. Some days I don't remember to do it. So that's actually something I'm very likely to put into Todoist because I need that reminder to do that task. Very likely what I will do is I will set it up with a reminder that's location-based. So that way when I come onto campus, that location-based reminder will say like, oh yeah, I have to do my health screening. So that way I don't forget. So those kinds of things I do find value in having a list in Todoist, but mostly as reminders. I don't use it for habit tracking because that's not helpful for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. Building the habit. So when you build the habit, Todoist can be useful for it. But once it becomes part of your routine to kick it off, I probably have a few recurring daily tasks that are like now so much part of my habit that I could probably remove them. That's awesome. So next question here we have is from Leland. Can you describe your weekly review and how you manage to protect that time?
Yeah, the weekly review can be challenging, particularly on weeks where I've got, a lot going on either on my calendar or in my task list. The biggest piece of advice that I always give folks for the weekly review is treat your weekly review like sacred time with yourself, right? Because that's really what it is. It's a meeting that you are having with yourself to get your game plan for the week. When I first started doing my weekly review, I remember going to my boss. I was like, hey, can I block off like an hour? At the time I was doing an hour and a half every Monday. And I think it threw him off a little bit, but he was like, well, let's try it. And I think, in my opinion, because of how I was using the weekly review and I was using it to essentially plan out my weeks, and I was able to be so productive in those weeks,
Yeah.
it really didn't impact anything negatively. So
Great.
I did have instances where something needed to be scheduled on Monday mornings. That's very, very rare. People are still kind of getting their feet set on Monday mornings. So that it didn't happen super often, but it didn't become a hindrance. So protecting the time is really, twofold. It's number one, deciding for yourself, making that commitment to do it. And number two, if necessary, bringing in, your colleagues and your coworkers. Hey, as much as possible, here's what this time is for. If we can have a meeting on a different time, that would be fantastic. If not, please let me know. But kind of stressing how crucial that time period is for mental health, for crying out loud. Like, for you to be able to go into your work week and not be super stressed and overwhelmed. So the weekly review process is essentially the one that's described in the GTD book. So you could just Google like GTD weekly review. It's reviewing your inboxes. I review my paper inbox. I review my email inbox. I go through my Todoist inbox. I do a brain dump into Todoist. Sometimes if I really, really need to focus, I will not do it on Todoist, because again, sometimes internet is distractions. And so I'll just do it on paper, and then I'll transcribe that into Todoist. I've also thought about putting it in Obsidian just as a text file, and then like just copying and pasting it into Todoist. And then when you paste it, all of the tasks show up. If I paste 20 lines of text, it puts in 20 tasks, which is awesome. So I don't have to type all of those things out. So sometimes I'll do that, but it's that process of, whatever I'm super worried about for that week, getting my game plan. I do my weekly reviews on Monday mornings. I tried Friday afternoons, and they were terrible for me. I kept overlooking them. I would just skip over them. I had too many things that I was doing. Mondays are usually best for me because nothing's come in yet, basically. So, I'm not going to have any interruptions. I'm not going to get any Monday morning meetings. So I review my lists, my next actions lists, my project lists, my waiting for lists. Sometimes if I have so much that I do and I'm not able to get it through everything in my 1 hour time period, I'll split it up. I'll do, the first weekly review of that week. The first hour is maybe just getting my inboxes clear, just clarifying everything and organizing it. And then the second hour will be when I'm reviewing my lists and getting current and all of that stuff. So it just really kind of depends. But always, never fails, when I skip my weekly reviews, my weeks are very stressful. So definitely recommend that weekly review process. And I have a video where I talk a bit about the weekly review as well. And you can follow along with me in the video on YouTube.
Yeah, well, if it was as inspiring as that, I mean, we should clip that, Jackie, and just post that, because I mean, even David Allen would love to hear the weekly review described in such detail. And it's so we see a lot of Todoist. Like level 1 is just getting your tasks in Todoist. Level 2 really is taking a little bit of time to plan it out. And there's a lot of benefits in addition to the many that Christina mentioned. But our subconscious does a lot of work. So if you know that you've got these 10 tasks up for the week, you might come to them with a lot more creativity and awareness than if it's just what's next and going to it. So again, going from reactive to proactive. That was really, really awesome to hear. So I think we're about out of time, but we have one more question to go for, which is from Yaniv. And it's, how do you combine your daily tasks with your calendar? Do you combine GTD with time blocking on your calendar?
Oh, that's a good question. So, combining my daily tasks, I don't use the calendar integration. I've tried that before, but as I mentioned before, I don't have a lot of tasks in Todoist that have dates, so it doesn't necessarily add value to me. If something needs to be done on a particular day, I'll add it to my calendar just as a calendar entry, and then I'll also put it in Todoist as a task. It shows up in that today view for me. So that's how I manage that. When it comes to time blocking, I very rarely will do time blocking. And when I do, it's time blocking based on contexts. So if I look at my emails list and there are 25 things on there, and let's say that I've only got like 2 hours of free time in my day, then I'll block off maybe an hour or two, and that will be my time blocking for my emails list. So that way I can make sure that I do that. So I do time blocking sometimes. I definitely don't do it every single day. I do it literally when I don't want to get scheduled. Like, please don't steal my 2 hours of time that I have left for this day. I just want to make sure that I've got time to actually do my work. So that's usually what time blocking looks like for me. I don't do time blocking for projects. I've found if I'm very honest with myself, it just never works. Like, I just don't. I'm like, no, I don't feel like doing that, or actually I don't have to do that. Like, I cannot fool myself into thinking I have to work on that thing, because I know I don't have to work on it. So that I don't.
Yeah, I see it. I sense a theme of like freedom. Your system provides you with the freedom to choose what you want to work on at the time, and know that it's not at the sacrifice of something else, because it's all in the system. So it's not like you'll be dropping the ball on something. You can choose something and go for it full with your full mind in it.
Absolutely. I feel like that's so much of why I love GTD. Like, as much as sometimes people talk about, oh, it's so rigid, it's so rigid. Like, it's as rigid as you need it to be to provide that framework, right? It's like a free range, chicken or whatnot, right? Like, they still, at some point, there's some boundaries somewhere, right? That's property line or whatever it happens to be. But within that structure, there's that freedom to kind of roam around and know that, okay, this structure is the safety of knowing that things are not going to get out of control. But now that I don't have to think about being out of control, now that I know that I'm safe, so to speak, what do I want to do? Like, oh, wow, this safety and freedom. I don't need to be so anxious about, can I get all of this stuff done? And am I going to have time to get it done? I'm absolutely going to have time to get it done. It's the things that I have decided are priority based on, values and things of that nature, and being able to move forward into my week knowing that.
Well, that's great. That was a perfect note to end it on. I think that's a fantastic description of what GTD enables in terms of freedom. Thank you, everyone, so much for all the comments and enthusiasm. Please follow Christina on social media at Organizing Higher. And thanks so much for your time. I hope you have a productive week and a week with a lot of freedom. Thank you very much, Christina.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks, Neil.